market environment, so foreign countries. And then we also do strategy, consulting, and execution, essentially preparing companies to go abroad. What we wanted to get across is the operational interactions that we have with businesses in China, Chinese business and foreign businesses in the United States, as well as U.S. businesses and investors that want to go abroad. Some of their concerns, some of their issues, and some of the opportunities that we see, and trying to keep it in line with the BRICS. The BRICS discussion is there's some takeaways that could apply to the other countries as well. One of the things that we like to focus on is that our team collects experiences and resources, and this means local at the appropriate level that your company is looking for. So local might mean a senior management issue. Local might mean what's the consumer buying on the street. So we take these local resources and incorporate it into how we look at things, our viewpoint, and how we design your strategy. All right, so just some general things, and this is doing business in Asia, but it really can be considered doing business, in foreign countries as well. Asia in particular, we focus on China, Southeast Asia, and the emerging economies along Belt and Road. We follow market trends and policy. And one thing to consider is that each country is different. Each country has a different set of laws, rules, and in Asia particularly, and same thing with the African Union, you have so many different cultural backgrounds, language, history. Each province has different incentives, regulations. The motivations behind why people do things are different. Like Dimitri was saying, if you look at just China itself, and you have east, west, north, south, Mandarin-speaking population. All right, so just some general things, and this is doing business in Asia, but it really can be considered doing business, in foreign countries as well. Asia in particular, we focus on China, Southeast Asia, and the emerging economies along Belt and Road. We follow market trends and policy. And one thing to consider is that each country is different. Each country has a different set of laws, rules, and in Asia particularly, and same thing with the African Union, you have so many different cultural backgrounds, language, history. Each province has different incentives, regulations. The motivations behind why people do things are different. Like Dimitri was saying, if you look at just China itself, and you have east, west, north, south, Mandarin-speaking population. When you're preparing your team, whether that's your negotiators, your lawyers, your marketing department, PR, operational directors, or line managers, they have to be aware of these as well. And this also leads to differences in consumer habits that a lot of times go overlooked. In China, they like to take their time to get to an issue. Not all the time, but it's one of those cultural factors that when we're dealing with something, we want to know the process on how is the information going to be sent out, how is it going to be received, and this translates into the business practices, and not just the cultural do's and don'ts, but the really in-depth background into kind of the why and how things are performed. Look at reciprocity issues. When you're doing business in another country, and I know most, if not all of you, have experienced this, but if there's a hot topic or political issue that's affecting that country in the United States, that can affect how your interactions are and interactions to you, and how people in that country treat you. For those of you who aren't aware, in November 2018, Dolce & Gabbana was preparing for their upcoming Shanghai fashion show, and they had a series of videos that depicted a Chinese actress using chopsticks trying to eat Italian food. And needless to say, many of them were suggestive. Some said they're culturally insensitive, racist, and it created a complete uproar in China. And within 4 days, you had thousands and thousands of distribution and sales outlets that suddenly closed off to D&G. Even after an apology from the D&G founders, Dolce & Gabbana founders, a few days later, their apology still has not made things right. And even just a month ago, this issue is still in the news. The takeaways for businesses: when you're preparing a business, when you're talking to them, many of the U.S. businesses and ways of doing things, we tend to feel that we think outside the box. And a lot of times we'll introduce you'll see marketing teams or operations teams or products that are introduced to the Chinese market or foreign market that isn't localized, the marketing material, the PR campaign, everything isn't synchronized, and you have issues such as this. And what's important to know is that if you don't have if you don't have a crisis plan in place, even to say what happens if someone doesn't like this ad and start very basic like that, that can close off your entire sales channels. Valuing and listening to your local partners on the ground, even if you don't end up going with their advice, is still important because this helps you plan for the eventual crisis if it does take place. And additionally, with the way local social media is utilized, you don't want to be caught off guard by your inadvertent ad or campaign or product to spark outrage, and you don't have a plan in place to mitigate that. So these are just some takeaways, but something that a lot of companies still don't realize, even Fortune 100 companies, they don't realize how different the consumer habits are. They don't stay on top of the local trends, and they don't stay on top of, and they don't listen to their local partners as much. Just because of the sheer size, in China specifically, there's still considerable undersaturation and growth potential in key sectors. This is healthcare, aviation, even automotive, but it's likely going to be different than what you think, and if you're not aware of the trends, how things are changing in tier 3, tier 4 cities, and the local regulations and government subsidies that are going along with many of these key sectors, you're going to be underprepared. And you don't have to be a Fortune 500 company to start taking advantage of a lot of these opportunities, but you can still start understanding what opportunities are out there, and then also the risk that comes along with that. We see still a high level of interest from Chinese investors that want to come to the United States companies that want to come to China, and also when the United States plan to go to China, we also advise them to look at Indonesia, Malaysia, Vietnam, even Myanmar is something that we are closely following, because if it works in China, most likely, depending on what it is, it may work in the other countries. Now there's different localization costs, but say you're a manufacturer and you go to China because it's got an established ecosystem for your logistics, supply chain, import, export, and all of that. You might find the same thing in Indonesia right now because of simply the growing infrastructure based around Chinese companies that are manufacturing here. Risks, you have political risks, again, new laws, perception issues, and you have the political instability that comes with both domestic and international issues. So just some quick areas from the process and business perspective. It's been talked about, so rule of law, improving the process, and really improving the experience for the foreign business team that goes over. A lot of times, we like to joke about customer service, and some countries have lacked some areas. Even in the United States, you can definitely tell which areas are service friendly. But it's when someone goes over, both Chinese coming to the U.S. and U.S. companies going to China or Southeast Asia, if they have a bad experience, they're likely not going to work there, even if the business case makes sense. They'll think it's too many issues, too many barriers. Just because we're talking about, I'm focused on U.S. or China, here's some issues to consider if you're working with a Chinese company that's coming into the U.S. or Russian company or any company that wants to be involved in new technologies or national security or areas that have large data of U.S. citizens. So, based on me attending many of these events and our analysts looking at this, here are some basic. This is from a non-legal perspective, so I could be getting this all wrong. But they want, the CFIUS panel seems to want to know what is the level of control of a foreign partner, what is the access the investor has to IP or technical information, is the product or technology to have dual use, is there a national security concern, and then if you don't know what the trend in national security is, then you're way behind the curve. And you're just setting yourself up for failure. So staying on top of political trends towards the national security discussion is important. And what we're seeing on the ground is Chinese companies, even as benign as building chairs or watches are now concerned about being rolled up in CFIUS because they want to sell or manufacture, partner with a company in the United States, but they don't understand what's going on, and the political environment and rhetoric is just making this less interesting or less of an incentive to come in. Anyway, that's my 45-minute dry presentation. So if you have any questions, please ask me, and I'm here till the end of the